It was supposed to be just another mission. May 18, 1965, deep in the Laotian jungle, a U.S. Air Force F-105 Thunder Chief was ripped apart by anti-aircraft fire. The pilot, Captain David Hrdlicka, ejected and parachuted into hostile territory. He radioed that he was alive, that he was uninjured. Then, nothing. He vanished into the jungle and into one of the most gripping mysteries of the Vietnam War. The U.S. government would later declare him dead, but photographs, broadcasts, declassified CIA missions, and Soviet news reports all suggested he survived, perhaps for years. So what really happened to Captain Hrdlicka? And why, decades later, are there still no clear answers? Join us as we commemorate Memorial Day 2025 with a special episode of the Sheldrake Files. David Hrdlicka was born in 1937 in Minnesota. He was known for his discipline, his commitment to duty, and his calm, collected demeanor. After joining the Air Force, he became a top-tier pilot, eventually assigned to fly one of the most challenging and dangerous aircraft of the time, the Republic F-105 Thunder Chief. Nicknamed the Thud, it was built for speed and power, primarily used to deliver heavy bomb payloads over enemy targets. Before his deployment, Hrdlicka was stationed at McConnell Air Force Base in Kansas. There, he lived with his wife Carol and their children. He was a family man, deeply connected to his wife and proud of his role as a father. Friends remembered him as quiet but thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor and an unwavering loyalty to his country. In 1965, the Vietnam War was expanding, and Laos, despite being officially neutral, became a focal point in the shadow conflict between East and West. The Ho Chi Minh Trail, a critical supply route for North Vietnamese troops, ran through Laos, making it a strategic target for U.S. operations. The CIA and U.S. military operated covertly in Laos under classified programs like Operation Barrel Roll and Operation Steel Tiger. American pilots conducted bombing runs without public knowledge or official acknowledgement. Laos, in effect, became a testing ground for secret war tactics and off-the-record military missions. This secrecy meant that when things went wrong, like a pilot being shot down, responses were often delayed, limited, or complicated by the political and diplomatic landscape. Captain Hrdlicka's squadron was assigned a dangerous mission: disrupt North Vietnamese supply lines by striking key points along the trail in Hoa Phan province. It was a heavily defended area, riddled with anti-aircraft positions and patrolled by Pathet Lao forces. During the mission, Hrdlicka's plane was hit by intense anti-aircraft fire. The F-105 burst into flames and he was forced to eject. His fellow pilots watched his parachute deploy, and they heard his voice on the radio. He was alive. Rescue teams were launched, but the jungle was dense, the terrain unforgiving, and enemy fighters were already closing in. He was quickly captured by Pathet Lao guerrillas. By the time U.S. helicopters arrived, there was no trace of him. More than a year later, a crackle of radio static brought his name back into the public. In July 1966, a Laotian radio broadcast played a recorded message from Hrdlicka himself. He was alive. The message was short but clear. He identified himself, asked for humane treatment, and requested help for his family. A few weeks later, Pravda, the Soviet state newspaper, published a photo of a thin, weary American under guard. Analysts confirmed it was Hrdlicka. In the years that followed, there were more sightings, more signals. Intercepted Pathet Lao communications referred to a long-term American moved between prison sites. CIA memos from 1968 mentioned Hrdlicka by name. He hadn't disappeared. He was still out there, somewhere. In 1966, a secret CIA-led mission called Operation Duck Soup set out to extract American prisoners believed to be held in a remote part of Laos. But the records note something chilling. Hrdlicka was recaptured. That was the last time his name appeared in a mission log. What happened after remains unknown. There were whispers, unconfirmed reports that he may have been held in underground facilities, moved between locations to avoid detection. Some intelligence operatives believed he was one of several Americans held long-term as bargaining chips. Despite the evidence of his survival, the U.S. government reclassified Hrdlicka as died while captured in 1977. There were no remains. No returning POWs ever claimed to have seen him. But for Carol Hrdlicka, that answer wasn't good enough. Over the years, she received conflicting reports. One suggested he had died of disease. Another hinted he may have been executed. A third simply said he'd vanished. She began filing Freedom of Information Act requests, pouring through hundreds of redacted documents. Her efforts uncovered contradictions, inconsistencies, and memos that raised more questions than answers. Some documents referenced a priority prisoner still believed to be alive in Laos. Others acknowledged a failure to follow up on credible leads. By the 1980s, Hrdlicka's story became a rallying cry for the growing POW-MIA movement. Families across the country, like Carol, demanded the truth. Rallies, press conferences, and lobbying efforts brought national attention to their cause. Carol became one of the most vocal advocates. She appeared on national news programs, testified before Congress, and met with senators and presidents. She pushed for transparency, accountability, and most of all, answers. In a particularly moving interview, she said, "This is not just about my husband. This is about every American who went missing. We made a promise not to forget them. It's time we kept that promise." In 1991, a former Pathet Lao officer claimed that Hrdlicka was still alive in 1983 and had been executed after negotiations with the U.S. fell apart. Another report from 1993 described a white male prisoner seen in a remote part of Laos, closely guarded and speaking English. Ivan Shedorov, a Russian journalist with ties to the Soviet diplomatic corps, told investigators he had seen Hrdlicka at a Laotian government event in 1973. According to him, Hrdlicka looked aged and thin, but alert. Despite the credibility of some of these sources, the U.S. government remained firm. There was no conclusive proof. Hrdlicka's disappearance had long-term effects, not only on his family but on how the U.S. military handled missing personnel. The Defense POW-MIA Accounting Agency, or DPAA, was eventually tasked with solving these Cold War cases. Each year, analysts and recovery teams review decades-old cases. New technologies like DNA matching and advanced forensics have helped solve some of them, but the trail in Hrdlicka's case has always led to more speculation than resolution. The DPAA still lists his case as active. His DNA is on file. Investigators have traveled to Laos, interviewed locals, and even excavated old prison campsites. So far, no conclusive evidence. Today, Captain, now Colonel Hrdlicka, is honored at multiple national memorials. His name is inscribed on the Courts of the Missing at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific. At McConnell Air Force Base, a memorial display includes a Thunder Chief in his honor. But perhaps his most powerful legacy lives in the stories, the files, and the unending search for the truth. His name has become part of the national dialogue on war, duty, and accountability. Military historians study his case in classrooms. Documentaries and books have featured his story. His wife's activism has inspired others to speak out. His children, now grown, continue to advocate for closure. The story of David Hrdlicka also reflects a larger theme: the moral complexity of covert warfare, and the long-term human consequences that unfold long after the last shot is fired. His disappearance is not just a military mystery. It's a case study in how bureaucracy can fail, how records can become buried under red tape, and how political considerations can outweigh individual lives. For many veterans and military families, Hrdlicka represents a painful question. What does it mean to truly bring our people home? When wars are waged in secret, can promises still be kept in public? And how do we reckon with ghosts that have no graves? His name appears in places both official and intimate, etched in black granite on the Vietnam Memorial, whispered during remembrance ceremonies, written on yellowed newspaper clippings saved in boxes by those who still remember. As long as someone speaks his name, David Hrdlicka remains part of the story, not finished, not forgotten, but suspended between loss and truth, memory and evidence. There are many stories like his, but each is uniquely personal. A name, a face, a family, a quiet sacrifice made in a time of loud conflict. And for those still asking, still waiting, still hoping, the search is not just for one man, it's for what he represents, the idea that no one sent to serve should ever disappear without a trace. So we keep asking, we keep looking, because sometimes the most powerful act of remembrance is refusing to let the silence win.